Check Podcasts. Hi, welcome to Chamber Chats. I'm Bruce Williams. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. And I begin, as always, by acknowledging that I live and work in the ancestral territories of the Lekwungen-speaking nations, the Songhees and the Esquimalt. A privilege and an honor to live and work alongside them every day. Chamber Chats is made possible by the support of Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union, and we are once again in the podcasting studios of Czech Television. This time around, it's part two of our conversation with Dr. Kate Moran, who is the president and CEO of Ocean Networks Canada, one of the world's leading organizations that's taking a look at what is going on in our oceans. So, Kate, thanks again for making the time and welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
You mentioned at the end of the last one that some of the monitoring that you do is on the seabed and the ocean floor of the Arctic, which is one of the things it's so Canadian. But tell me about what is life like on the ocean bed and in the areas in the Arctic?
Well, the life actually follows the ice. And so in the wintertime, it's ice covered. And so the actual life forms actually, go into hibernation. And as soon as the light, it's dark up there, starts to come through the ice, you're starting to see the rebirth of life in the Arctic Ocean. Most importantly, what we're monitoring there for the community is the thickness of the sea ice. Now, sea ice is not, it's reducing significantly in the Arctic. And so the Inuit are concerned about utilizing the ice for going out to hunt or to take shortcuts. In Cambridge Bay, where we have our observatory, they typically take shortcuts across the ice to go to the airport. And so when we first installed it, it was like an aha moment for us that, wow, these community members want to see these data real time, 24/7, especially the sea ice thickness, so they can make their own decisions about staying safe and understanding the changes in the environment. So that it's really driven by the darkness during the winter and the light in the summer, and the rapidity at which the ice goes away during the spring thaw.
So again, here, kind of a borderline dumb question, but I'll ask it anyway. We talk about Arctic and what happens there in the polar regions. What's the polar sea versus the equatorial seas versus more temperate climates? How do the seas and the sea life differ in those regions according to the climate in which they live?
Yeah, well, the Arctic Ocean is one of the freshest oceans, so the life there is reflective of that, and also reflective of the fact that half of the year it's really dark and there's no light. So the species there have been in the past unique. What we're seeing now in the Arctic, just to give you an anecdote of what's happening, is we're now knowing, based on physical oceanography studies, is that Atlantic Ocean water and Pacific Ocean water are now coming into the Arctic Ocean and mixing. So the Arctic Ocean is changing, not only the fact that the sea ice is reducing, but the invasiveness of the species will be happening there. And there's anecdotal evidence that even there's orca moving into the Arctic Ocean. The equatorial ocean is, obviously very warm water. They host many of the coral reefs, and those are very special settings for different kinds of species. The equatorial waters tend to have less nutrients. And so the temperate waters, like off our coast and the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, for example, colder waters hold more nutrients. So that's why many of the big fisheries of the world have been in these temperate or higher latitude waters. So that's some of the basic differences among the regions. But we're now seeing a lot of mixing now in the Arctic Ocean from the two big oceans that are adjacent to it.
Yeah, and the ability, and I don't want to go on too long about this, but in the north, with that water being as it is, as you said, it holds nutrients a little better. What do we find in those waters? I mean, the average person says, well, there's beluga whales and there's seals and there's walrus. What other life forms exist in that water?
Oh, it's the basic life forms, foraminifera and the smallest life forms that form shells. They're just different species, typically. But sometimes they're the same species. And then there's whales and there's fish.
Yeah.
And those are the life. But it's changing. And there's going to be, there's concern that there'll be more fishing boats going into the Arctic and extracting too much fish as the sea ice goes away. It's really the concern is that the sea ice is going away and it'll be easier to access the Arctic and exploit it. That's the concern.
Yeah, that's pretty sad when we see the disappearing ice flows and the polar bears are leaner than they used to be. That kind of stuff is all the impact of this whole thing rolling around. So we talk about what ONC does to monitor what goes on in the oceans, but there's also stuff that's happening On land, you have something that's community-based monitoring. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so we have two programs where, because of our experience in the Arctic, where we learned that communities really want to have their own data to understand their own coastal oceanfront yard. We partner with mainly indigenous communities, and in some communities we actually install a cabled observatory, and we work with them very closely because we don't go in and say, here's what you should measure. We talk with them to understand their concerns. Like some are more interested in understanding the fisheries in their region or the whales in their region, or really many of them are really interested in exposing their children to science and technology and how exciting it is to actually have instruments that can measure things right in your, as I said, your oceanfront yard. So we install sometimes cabled observatories that monitor hydrophones and water quality and nutrients and camera systems. And so then what we do is we work with the community through what we call a youth science ambassador. We hire someone in the community who can then help us to prepare the data that's useful for each of those communities. And then we have a citizen science program that we deploy as well, where we basically have a very simple an instrument that's built here on Vancouver Island that is an oceanographic sensor that they take out on their own vessels, and they do casts, lower a sensor through the water column at the same location week after week to collect their own data. And we have the back end, the data side, all very simplified so that the data, once they collect the data, it shows up on our website for them to use right away. So it's empowering essentially those indigenous communities to have their own data, to make their own decisions, and to be able to be at the table with other players like industry and government.
And you talk about that stuff being manufactured right here on Vancouver Island. People may or may not be aware of those companies, but what are their names?
The ASL is one of them. Arctic Sciences is another. JASCO. I'm sure I'm missing some of them.
Yeah, we have a number of them that are chamber members too. That is the reason
Rockland also, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's many. We have a rich ecosystem of ocean sensor companies on Vancouver Island, on the mainland, and in Atlantic Canada.
Yeah. How many people are on the team that make all of this magic happen at ONC?
It's about 150 people that are on our team, and we have a very small administrative staff. So most of them are engineers, scientists, or technologists. And a lot of the people that we have on our team are data people, because what we deliver are data, and data does not manage itself. And investing in research data experts really helps us to deliver data openly. Anyone on the internet can go on our website, get the data. It's openly available for your use. And then we develop data products for anyone to understand various changes in the ocean, or if they have questions. And we have learning products that are there. Some of our staff go into the schools. And so please, for the audience, go to our website, check out what's there. And then we're always open to suggestions about how we can deliver the data better for anyone, the public, government, schools, scientists alike.
All the cool visuals you're seeing in this podcast actually are available through the website. And the number that I was given, it's 1.2 petabytes of data. I don't speak data, but that's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's over a petabyte. We have the biggest repository of sensor-based ocean data in the world. I mean, the satellite data is bigger than this, obviously, but this is sensor-based data, and it's big data. That's what we deliver, big data, and we have it. We duplicate it at the University of Waterloo so that it can't be lost, and we archive everything: video, all the hydrophone data, all the sensor data. All of that is accessible for use by anyone out there on the internet.
Some of the things that we're seeing draw a bit of an emotional response, and I want to talk about that next. Our guest on Chamber Chats today is Dr. Kate Moran. She is the president and CEO of Ocean Networks Canada, a worldwide, world-class organization monitoring our ocean beds, which is an affiliation of University of Victoria, one of our chamber champions, in fact. I want to go back to something we talked about in the first go-around with this conversation. You yourself have been to the seafloor. You've been to the bottom of the ocean. People that were predecessors to you, that were the early ones that went and had these first glimpses of things happening in the ocean that we had no idea. It's so emotional. I mean, the people that you work with all the time must be just blown away by this stuff all the time.
Absolutely. I mean, well, yeah, I know Bob Ballard really well. Many Canadians don't know him, but he's the guy who discovered the Titanic.
Yes, you did an event with him a few years ago that I emceed,
Yeah.
actually.
Yes. He's a colleague and a friend, and he was the one with in one of the submersibles that discovered black smokers.
Oh,
And I had heard stories about the scientists on that ship, and it was like they were just blown away. Could you imagine? It's the first time seeing this hot water coming out of the seafloor and these life forms that look like aliens. I mean, so it's that kind of discovery that just is so exciting. Yeah, and I've just when we operate remotely operated vehicles with cameras, and people could go live. We're sailing the day after tomorrow. We live stream all of our dives with the robots that we operate from the ships, so you too can actually experience discovery for the first time, and you'll hear the scientists. We live stream the audio and the video, so you can actually discover things for the first time with them by signing on to our website to watch our dives. But we discover things every time we go out.
Yeah, the Bob Ballard story is an interesting one because he was actually out looking for a couple of lost submarines at the time. Isn't that what it was? A military contract?
Well, he was it was a top secret mission with the U.S. military, yes. And then it took a little while for them to allow him to tell the story about the Titanic.
Yeah, because he was looking for these two lost submarines, but he wanted to find Titanic, which he eventually did. But he did that. Anyway, it's a really cool story. Bob Ballard is the guy's name. I want to talk next about earthquakes because you're a big part of making sure that we are warned or notified when earthquakes are either pending or have happened. Tell me about the work you do with that.
Yeah, there's several things we do. Obviously, we have seismometers that feed into the earthquake data set that's globally collected. But what we've been doing recently with capital funding from the province is install what's called an earthquake early warning system. And we're doing that in partnership with the NBC and Natural Resources Canada. But what happens is when an earthquake happens, there's energy that's generated and it travels in waves through the earth. It's not waves through the water. And so these waves that travel through the earth, there's two kinds. One's called a primary wave because it moves fast and we can measure it, but it doesn't cause ground shaking. And then the slower traveling wave called the secondary wave comes later and it causes ground shaking. So we have a dense network of these sensors that sense the primary wave. And then we can immediately calculate the location of the earthquake, the time it occurred. And then we can calculate at any location, in this area for when the ground shaking will arrive at your spot, so that you will have an alert time to do things, either automatically or get under your desk. But trains can slow down, elevators go to the bottom of the buildings, surgery can stop, many, many, many things. And so we're now in the commissioning phase of that. It's the first regional earthquake early warning system in Canada. And we hope that it can be delivering for those infrastructure saving and life-saving responses.
Yeah, I mean, when you stop and think about that, you listed a couple of things, but we get warnings so that we can stop, drop, and take cover. Trains are warned. Surgery is suspended. Bridge and tunnel traffic is stopped. Fire hall and ambulance garage doors open up so that there isn't a power failure that would stop that from happening because they're going to have to respond. Aircraft in the air have to know. Yeah. And all of that comes from this system. Because when you think about it, when we hear warnings that, there was a seismic event or earthquake was picked up X number of kilometers off the coast of Port Hardy or something. So because so much of the earth is covered in water, you have to tell us what's going on down there.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you said at the last time we met and talked, you talked about when you take the water away from the ocean, a lot of these fault zones, the ones that cause the big magnitude 8 to 9, are in the ocean. They're not on land. And so that's where we have to look. And there's so many more earthquakes in the ocean because of the fact that there's all these plate boundaries that sit right in the ocean.
You're also involved with something called carbon capture, which is a solution to some of the problems we have on this planet. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, we're doing a feasibility study called Solid Carbon, and we have a website called solidcarbon.ca that you can visit. And it's a feasibility study to really combine direct air capture of CO2 on a variety of types of ocean platforms, move that CO2 through the water column and inject it into the subsea floor at one of our sites first, at Cascadia Basin, because it's the best characterized site for what's called basalt. That's ocean crust. It's a type of rock. And in Iceland, it's been demonstrated that because Iceland is a chunk of ocean basalt above the water, they confirmed that injecting CO2 into ocean basalt turn the CO2 into rock in 2 years. And so it becomes the most durable, the largest reservoir for sequestration of CO2. And it is the future. And we know now, scientifically, that we are going to have to remove CO2 from the atmosphere. There is no question about it. We're going to have to do that to keep the planet habitable for humans. Now, in the geologic past, there's been extreme events, but we weren't around. We need a certain kind of temperature and a certain kind of environment as humans to survive. The planet will be fine. It'll go on doing other things. But it's for us to survive as a species that we need to do this.
Yeah.
And we're very excited. It's a very positive project. We have an incredibly diverse team of students who are just so excited about working on a solution that can actually happen and help keep the planet habitable for them and their kids and grandkids. So it's really exciting.
Future-proofing the planet, for sure. I want to talk a little bit more about how those images from the ocean bed are captured. Our guest on Chamber Chats today is Dr. Kate Moran. She is the president and CEO of Ocean Networks Canada, an organization affiliated with the University of Victoria. Cabled ocean viewing is something that I think we've all kind of seen when we think about craft that are on the ocean bed. But tell me about how they work and how much you work with that at Ocean Networks Canada.
Yeah, so we have cameras on all of our locations. A lot of them are used for research purposes. So on some of our sites, you can go on our website to look at the cameras. But one of the problems we have with cameras is, as you said in the last episode, it's dark down there. So cameras aren't good without lights. So we work with scientists at various sites to have the minimum amount of light that comes on. So it's several minutes every couple hours or so at various locations. And so that data is captured as to minimize the amount of light pollution in the ocean. And then we have sites that are in relatively shallow water, like our Folger Shallow site. It does have lights that come on every once in a while, but there's enough light that streams down that you can actually see in real time everything that's happening. All of our community observatories have cameras on them. They're all in relatively shallow water, so you can see octopuses. And there's a new crab at Campbell River that's cranky and tries to catch fish in front of the camera constantly. There's an octopus that is up in Kitimat that is now it has a name from the community.
Wow.
Yeah, so the cameras are just remarkable because you're actually seeing the ocean floor in real time. And then in the Arctic we actually have we have cameras on shore too that look out over the ocean. But the one in the Arctic is fabulous because it really documents the sea ice coming and going, and it's tremendous in terms of being able to understand that phenomenon better.
Yeah, the life that's down there. Back in my previous life as a television guy, I remember doing a story about a sea creature that was found that nobody had ever seen before. They didn't think they had. It actually came up in a fishing net, and it was given to a post-secondary for them to take a look at. But that, if it was a fish, I believe it was, it didn't have any eyes because there is no light where it lives. That's crazy. I mean, that's amazing.
Yes, it is amazing. Yeah, and I think octopuses, our logos are octopuses, and so and they don't live that long, but gosh, they do amazing things. It's just, the life in the ocean is pretty remarkable.
I've seen it on Netflix. There's a feature about a guy who develops a relationship with an octopus. It's my octopus friend or whatever it's called. But it's incredible that you see they're sentient beings. You understand exactly what they do. Tell me about Oceanographic Radar.
Oh, yes. So we have stations on land that are radar, and they're called coastal radar. And they actually send signals out to the surface ocean, and the backscatter, or the reflection off the surface ocean. When we combine two of those radars, we can calculate in real time the surface currents, how fast the water is moving, and the direction it's moving in. And those real-time data are really important for marine safety because, and especially in our region where the currents are incredible, those data are important for search and rescue, for oil spill response, and even just for recreational users who don't understand the current field. It's just good to go there and see that in real time. And we hope to develop more data products for the public because of that interest in ensuring that they know what's out there and they know what the currents are like in our region.
And we've had this cool, wet spring this year. It's a La Nina weather pattern, but that's the ocean's fault, right? That's because of what's going on in the ocean elsewhere on the planet.
Yeah, I mean it's part of the equatorial Pacific. It has this flip-flopping of colder water on the eastern part of the Pacific, which is called La Nina, and then El Nino, which is the warmer flip to the eastern part of the Pacific, and it really is a giant temperature channel, if you will. So it changes the climate of it changes the weather patterns on the Earth, and all across the planet. But in our area, it tends to make our area wetter in the springtime, which it has. It's also cooler here. And I think there's going to be an assessment of why that is. It can be associated with La Nina. It tends to be a little bit cooler, but it's been very cool here. And as you've probably seen in places like Pakistan, it's been extremely hot.
Yeah.
There has been, I'm guessing, this is a guess, that there also is influence from the breakdown of what's called a polar vortex, because that has been influencing our weather. So that may have some influence on these extreme temperatures, our cooling, and these extreme hot events in other parts of the planet. So we'll have to scientists will assess it, and we'll learn more about that as we analyze those data. But the polar vortex is also ocean driven. It is likely associated with the fact that we have a loss in sea ice, which means more heat's coming out of the Arctic Ocean, which means the temperature between the North Pole and mid-latitudes is not as strong a difference as it used to be. And that lack of difference in temperature makes the jet stream more wobbly.
Your own story is kind of interesting. You grew up in Pennsylvania, so you were landlocked. You didn't live anywhere near the ocean, but you felt this draw to get into ocean stuff. And at one point before you were here, you actually worked for the Obama administration in the inner circle of that. Tell me about what you did.
Yeah, I was privileged. I was privileged to work for the Office of Science and Technology Policy for the President's Science Advisor, who led the office. And I was hired to actually look at Arctic and polar issues and look at and help with the national ocean policy. And so those were some of my files that I worked on. But while I was there, the Deepwater Horizon accident happened. And so some of my other background is I used to be director of the International Ocean Drilling Program. And so I actually know about drilling, which people don't know about. But so I was pulled into Secretary of Energy Chu, President Obama, got Secretary of Energy Chu to lead a science team. I was one of 8 people with Secretary of Energy Chu that basically made the decisions what BP could and couldn't do to stop the flow of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. And so we were working 24/7 to really figure out how do we stop the oil from flowing into the Gulf of Mexico. And it was pretty remarkable experience for me. And I was really proud to be part of that team that stopped the flow of oil into the Gulf of Mexico.
Dr. Kate Moran is President and CEO of Ocean Networks Canada. Thanks so much for your time today.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Bruce.
That's it. See you again for another Chamber Chat.